Hi, this is Andy Hoffman, Media Director at Miles Franklin for my weekly audio blog. This week I have a very special guest, longtime friend Bix Weir of roadtoruta.com. Bix and I have been writing for GATA and other public sites for a long time, and Bix's site has been very popular itself for many years. Um, so I'm going to go right into this week's topics, and my God, is this, as Bix said, a good week to pick because this could go a long time if we don't cut it short. Let's start with the deal that was cut by Congress at the 11th hour to stop the debt limit from being breached and the world from falling apart. And I'm just going to start by saying it's called the Continuing Appropriations Act of 2014 because they already used up the Continuing Appropriations Act of 2013 doing the very same thing 6 months ago. That goes along with the Budget Control Act of 2011, in which we still have no budget and certainly no control. The American Taxpayer Relief Act of December 2012, which, if you remember, was the fiscal cliff deal in which they raised taxes. The No Budget, No Pay Act of February 2013, which delayed the debt ceiling under the condition that we'd have a budget or else. Well, guess what? We have no budget and we're still paying. And now this, of course, and as Bix and I just spoke of just before this call, people have not reported on this. This is very, very big news. Within this new law that just came out, there is a clause that says the president can now veto any legislation that attempts to raise the debt limit, and the only way to override it is with a two-thirds majority in both the Senate and the House, something which will never happen. So, Bix, what do you think of this? Is this truly debt ceiling to infinity?
It always has been. I think the most interesting thing about this go around, the powers that be for the last 60 years have been trying to maintain the confidence in the US dollar. And they do it through rigging the markets, through causing wars, through assassinations and destroying lives, distorting data. You name it, they do it. But the last 3 weeks, they have destroyed 60 years of confidence that they built up in the U.S. dollar. And my take is yes, they did it all on purpose because it's time to take down the dollar. It goes right in with the Bernanke saying, we're not going to start tapering. Everything is pointing towards removing all limitations on printing the US dollar and destroying the confidence in the dollar. Because once that's done, you can kiss interest rates goodbye. They're going to go through the roof, destroy all the derivatives attached to it, 50 trillion, I think it is, at JP Morgan. And then and then what do? You go back to gold standard. That's always how it's played out. So is it going to happen this time? I think so. I just don't know how fast.
Yeah, I mean, this truly is. I wrote of debt ceiling to infinity at last year's, debt ceiling discussions, and I expected it sooner or later, and this is it. In fact, the piece that I wrote yesterday was called "The Penultimate Deal with the Devil," meaning this congressional deal, because they basically just put off until February the debt ceiling, and well, come February, they're not going to be able to do this again. Come February, they're going to have to actually admit we are getting rid of it permanently, and when that happens, I think that is the end of any remaining confidence in the dollar. In fact, this little clause probably does the job for it. So, on that topic, Bix, let's talk about the three big dates that are coming up as a result of this deal. So, for anyone who's celebrating, because Google's over $1,000, here's what we have to look forward to in the coming 3 months. And remember, Congress will be off for a month for vacation for the holidays. So again, we're going to be stuffing an incredibly important amount of stuff into a very short amount of time. So Bix, tell me what you think is going to happen by December 13th, which is the date in which they don't call it a budget, but the new long-term spending plan to reduce spending is due or is expected to be passed by Congress.
Nothing. It'll be kicked down the road just like every other time. I think over the next couple of weeks you'll get the little mini euphoria that we're seeing today because everybody on Wall Street is excited that they're going to make more and more money. From the Fed kicking, buying stocks and driving up the shares on the Dow. But on December 13th, the plan was never to get the budget in hand. The plan was never to pay off the debt. The plan was never to spend within the debt ceiling. The plan was to run the monetary system as long as possible, sucking out all the benefits, houses and infrastructure and building your army until nobody accepts the unbacked fiat money anymore. So these deadlines have come and gone since 1971 when we went off the gold standard, and they'll continue to come and go until the entire system implodes.
That's right, and that's why Carlyle Group is now investing in trailer parks, if you could believe that. Um, as far as I'm concerned, December 13th, that hard date is no different than, if anyone remembers 2 years ago, the bipartisan super committee, which was expect to counter the $2.1 trillion increase in the debt ceiling with billions and hundreds of billions of spending cuts. They came up with absolutely nothing, which is why they created the whole fiscal cliff thing, which was subsequently cut in half and in half again. So yes, I expect that come December 13th, absolutely nothing will come of it, and then we'll have to move to the next two dates, the quote the big days, January 15th, which is theoretically when this law funds the government through, and February 7th, when the debt ceiling can no longer, well, when we will have another breach. So, Bix, do you believe that on either January 15th or February 7th, we will repeat what we just had right here? Or do you think that something more drastic will occur in the financial markets? Do you believe it's possible that the powers that be outside the Western world may start to actually do something about it?
I think they are big dates only because for a few things. One, the Republicans don't like losing, and they lost this time supposedly. It was both the Republicans and the Democrats that were, bringing this thing to the ninth hour, and that was the idea: destroy the confidence in the dollar. It's going to be worse this coming time if we even make it this far. I mean, right now the whole world is saying, China's saying we have to de-Americanize the world, and you got the Chinese rating agency downgrading the U.S. The process of destroying the dollar has started, and it'll be a great thing when it picks up speed, because that'll end this insane world in which we live right now. And hopefully, when the dollar crashes and everybody loses everything, we can restart the system with a more more stable form of currency, like gold, for example, and get our governments and our economies to stop lying about every single figure they release.
Yeah, I mean, it truly is remarkable. People look at the dollar index, which is it's a bogus index because it's made up 64% euro and 22% yen. So it really just is a measure of how the dollar does against the euro and the yen. And I think
Which are all unbacked currencies as
exactly,
well.
exactly. And the thing that's remarkable for people who try to think, well, the dollar is strong, etc. The fact is the dollar is sitting near its historic lows, which is quite remarkable considering that Europe is on the verge of breaking apart and Japan is doubling its currency, its money supply in a 2 year period in a money in fact we're printing 85 billion a month. They, with a much smaller population, are printing 115 billion a month. So that just shows you just how weak the dollar is. And like you said, I mean, my God, the Chinese, who are very, very coy about the way they talk and they don't like to ruffle feathers, they have been as vocal as I've ever seen them about the need to replace the dollar, to de-Americanize the world. And of course, their rating agency had just downgraded America to only a few notches above junk. So, what do I think is going to happen in the first quarter of the year? I think the government would love to repeat what happened with the fiscal cliff in this. That is, the markets still go up and confidence is still there. But I think there's too many headwinds from around the world. And this time around, there's much less physical gold and silver around. You've seen the massive premiums, the negative forward rates, and of course the declining inventory. So I would stay tuned, and I would not be complacent. Now let's talk about, on the topic of manipulation, Goldman's slam dunk sell call, which they put out on gold, which they put out last week just before it coincidentally was smashed right down. What do you think Goldman is up to? Do you think it's a government plan? Do you think it means anything?
I don't think Goldman is in the on the government payroll these days. I think J.P. Morgan's the main guy there as far as getting the inside information from the exchange stabilization fund and all that stuff. I think Goldman is out to make a buck and trying to talk towards what they want to happen in their book. They're going to say, yeah, it's going to slam, gold's going to be slammed, and then they start to slam, and then they end up picking up a bunch of gold, and they tell all their clients to get out when they're getting in, and they're beyond corrupt. But I don't think they're in the inner circle anymore. Within the inner circle, I mean by those the official manipulation from the Exchange Stabilization Fund, the Plunge Protection Team, Treasury, Fed, J.P. Morgan. Those guys have pretty much taken the reins away on the large scale from Goldman because of all the troubles they've had. I believe.
Yeah.
Obviously we don't know exactly who is pulling the levers behind the curtain right now, but I'll guarantee you that the exchange stabilization fund is still in there, and the Treasury and the Fed and J.P. Morgan.
Well, let's face it, Goldman is always going to be part of the system, and they've got plenty of people in the government, not just our government. They got the head of the Bank of England. They have the head of the ECB, so they're always around. But like you said, Goldman is a much smaller entity than say a J.P. Morgan. They're not as deeply capitalized, so it's hard to believe they have the ability to get as much done as a J.P. Morgan in the markets. That said, back in April they put out a call like that the day before Blentz Blankfein met with the president. Sure enough, they met again 2 weeks ago, and then this slam dunk call. But I agree. I think a lot of it is they know that they have power. They know that even zero hedge will put anything that they say out, and people trade on that, and they could buy the physical while the paper is being shorted. So I don't put too much into what Goldman says. Look, I was a sell side analyst for many years at Solomon Smith Barney. I know what Goldman says. Their analysts who are not all connected are just as dumb as the rest. So I wouldn't get too excited about what Goldman says.
Well,
Yeah.
what is the deal with the president meeting with all these heads of the banks right before we go into a budget crisis, and you have Citi and you have J.P. Morgan selling all their short-term debt before the crisis even started, but after they met with the president. I mean, it's getting so blatant. They used to call people on the phone and do it secretly, but now, hey, let's have a meeting. Come on over to the White House, and they'll tell you what's about to happen to the economy.
Yeah, I mean that was the whole thing with Hank Paulson, of course. And now, if people remember, wow, a whopping 3 weeks ago, when Larry Summers suddenly backed out from being a candidate for the Fed chairman, because it was spreading virally that he was meeting with all the heads of the banks, and yet they'll publicly say Obama meeting, closed door meeting with Lance Blankfein, Jamie Dimon, the head of Morgan Stanley, of Bank of America. How on earth can they be allowed to be meeting with the president? And how could anything but inside information be coming out of it? It's just truly incredible.
Complete insanity has hit and it's hit the mainstream media. I mean, they tout it as Obama's getting advice. Give me a break. Mainstream media is bought and sold just like everybody else in Washington.
Yeah, well, I mean, remember the Wall Street is one of the largest lobbies. In fact, the companies themselves are always on top of the list. Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, et cetera, are always on the top of the list of lobbyers. So they pretty much own the presidency, and that's why they get in and they get this information. Yet, more information that the MSM doesn't care about. But speaking of Jamie Dimon, as you just mentioned, that J.P. Morgan is clearly a government entity, which I agree with wholeheartedly. He was asked just 2 days ago on whether the U.S. bond market would be able to handle what America is doing with the money printing, and he said, "quote It's virtually assured the bond market will collapse. The question is when and how. I don't know if it will be 2 years or five, but it will happen. It is a matter of time, as the United States can't borrow indefinitely. Over hundreds of years, we've seen bankruptcies of country after country that thought they could get away with things because they had the reserve currency and military power." Now, this is coming from the man who is most responsible for propping up markets for the government. So why do you think Jamie Dimon is talking this way? And can there possibly be anyone on earth who doesn't understand that what he's saying is true?
Well, it's funny, Jamie Dimon and J.P. Morgan hold the largest interest rate swap position in derivatives. I think it's 46 or 48 trillion dollars in interest rate derivatives, as reported by the OCC. Now, for Jamie Dimon to say this, the obvious stuff, yes, the U.S. dollar can't go on forever. Is he taking the short side of the U.S. dollar on these 46 trillion in derivatives? Is if he wins, oh great, they win, but all the other losers can't pay out 46 trillion to Jamie and friends. I mean, the amount of bets, side bets, the derivative bets on, they call it hedging. We're just hedging our position. How could you have $46 trillion worth of hedges, Jamie Dimon? I mean, the insanity of the leverage used beyond the normal leverage, beyond the 20 or 15 to 20 to 1 that banks have. They have these side bets that are off the books, all in the derivative market, in the hundreds of trillions of dollars. Any kind of disruption in the interest rates or the currency markets could destroy any player within that market who's betting trillions at a time.
Yeah, and part of it goes to, well, there's two things. I see Alan Greenspan just put out a book today about economic forecasting of all things, and he has been so vocal since he left the chairmanship in talking about how gold is good and the government is spending too much, etc. He's trying to whitewash his legacy. So he doesn't want people to blame him for something that he clearly was responsible for. And when it comes to Jamie Dimon, one, he's trying to do that. He's trying to make his reputation so that he could say, I said this. And at the same time, like you said, he's trying to plot how to save JP Morgan, because he knows what's going on with gold. He knows what's going on with the stock markets and the repo market and all these things. And what he says is very important, because he's positioning himself and he's trying to get people to make trades that will help JP Morgan. And so I think that this is extremely, extremely important and should be red flagged by anyone who's watching the financial markets.
I would want to mention,
Mm-hmm.
and I know we've talked about this before, within the road to Ruta theory, my theory on what's really happening, Alan Greenspan did it all on purpose. I'm not saying he didn't destroy the system. I'm saying he did, but I'm talking about his motivation. And when he started back in the 60s with his, he wrote the first computer programs for banking. He blamed himself for the Y2K issue. And we all know he was the biggest gold bug in the world back in the 60s. The question comes in when he went to the Federal Reserve, and all of a sudden people were shocked in 1987 when Alan Greenspan was appointed as the head of the Fed, because he was the most anti-fiat money guy around. He loved gold and said we should return to using gold as money. And then he gets to the head of the Fed, and what does he do? He completely destroys the dollar by keeping interest rates too low for way too long. Now, it's my contention that he did it on purpose, and it's all part of the plan. And that's kind of the basis of the U.S. dollar. And those computer programs that he invented back in the 60s and 70s are still in use today to control the dollar, to run it up as fast and as long as possible in order to get all the benefits and then destroy it. So that's my take on Greenspan, and I'd love to have a long argument or discussion with you about.
There's no need.
Greenspan, but
There's no need to argue. My view is that anything is possible. Unfortunately, it's unlikely we'll ever be told. I always take the Occam's razor view that the simplest thing would be, look, he got into office, he got an extremely powerful position, and the simplest thing to do is print money. I mean, why let things collapse when you could prolong them a little longer? And then, of course, then it became unsustainable, and he had to keep doing it. But it may or may not be true. I'm not arguing with it all.
I think it was. I do think one day, after all this is done, and after we've gone through the pain of a collapse and a rebirth of our monetary system, I do think it would be a good time at that point for him to come out and say, all right, here's what really happened over all those years.
Yeah, but he's quite an old man, and I don't know how much longer he's going to be around to tell that story.
I don't know how long we're going to be around the way he's delaying this thing.
So anyway, let's go to my one final topic here. which I had to bring up as we watch the PPT. Well, it's partly the PPT. I mean, yes, they are in there every day with their same patterns, propping up the stock market, and the same thing goes for Europe and Japan, where there's clearly intervention. We have the worst fundamentals that we've seen, and these rocketing PE ratios. Google hit $1,000 per share today, but I
And the
think.
bond market is their the mother of all their interventions.
Yeah, and all of a sudden the
Dropping
bond
rates.
market is going back up again on this news that we're going to print indefinitely. Uh,
They set their computers to where they want to go and they click the enter button and their day's work is done.
but I think people really need to know. I've written about this before, and it just came up again today. Caracas, Venezuela, their stock exchange is up 315% this year. Now, if anyone has looked, just Google Venezuela economy, Venezuela inflation. They are literally at the point where hyperinflation is starting to take root. I would guess a year from now it'll be full blown. It's that bad. They have the changeover of presidency. They've gone berserk with their money printing, and the market is up 300%. So, Bix, do you think there's any reason why Venezuela could go up that much, other than the fear of hyperinflation? And do you think that what's going on in the United States, PPT notwithstanding, is the beginnings of the same thing?
Well, Venezuela and all the South American countries, they all know what's going on in the U.S. They all know, we print money and we buy stock and we prop up the market and, we control inflation through rigging the numbers. So, they're in on the game. They're trying to do the same thing we're doing, print as much money for as long as you can, unbacked fiat money as long as you can, give it to all the poor people, give it, for the construction to build houses, because at the end of the day, it's all going to collapse, and the only thing you'll be left with is those physical things that you put in place. So I think they're in on it. I think 100%. I know they understand about gold, and Chavez holding up bars of gold, saying you crazy Americans are going to take all our gold back. They know exactly what's going on. So the stock market going up 300%. Their own plunge protection team is printing money to buy that, I'm sure, and I'm sure the U.S. is in there trying to cause hyperinflation to destroy their country. The only thing I know for sure is that everything is rigged in every market. So you can make up as many reasons as you want as to why things happen, but until you look behind the curtain and see who's pressing those computer keys to make it happen, you're not going to know for sure.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're all taking the U.S. model. They see what the U.S. is doing, and they say, why not try it? It's the only thing we can do. And
There's not much
unfortunately,
time left. Might as well.
yeah, and unfortunately, when you don't have the reserve currency, it causes damage much quicker, which is why the average currency is down by over 20% against the dollar in the last 2 years, because they're all doing the same thing, yet the world doesn't accept their currencies for transactions. So, on that note, we'll end with this one final data point that now that the debt ceiling has been lifted, all those extraordinary measures have been exhausted, and voila, $350 billion just got added to the U.S. debt today. So we're at
Over 17 trillion. Can you believe that?
17.1 trillion. Yes. So anyway, this was a great session, Bix. I hope to do it again. Why don't you tell the public about your website and how to get a hold of you?
Roadtoruta.com. Just come on and join the fun. You can sign up to get free emails and try to get a little peek behind the curtain.
Great. Well, I look forward to talking to you soon.
All right, Andy. Thanks a lot.
Okay.